Prince George's County. My name is Sterling J, and I'm honored to be your host today for a very important conversation brought to you by the Solid Foundation, Inc. Today's topic is domestic violence and assault without weapons, which is deeply personal as it affects far too many lives in our county. So today, we've gathered key voices, law enforcement, legal experts, elected leaders, and community advocates to delve into this issue to explore real solutions. So let's welcome our panelists. Today we have, John D.B. Carr, Sheriff John D.B. Carr, my apologies, from Prince George's County. We have Lieutenant Goings from Bladensburg, Maryland, and then we have Chief Cedric Hayward from Seat Pleasant, Maryland. So let's welcome our guests. And also on the panel today, we have LaTasha Ward, the Executive Director for the Solid Foundation, Inc. So can we give her a hand as well? Tasha?
So Tasha, take it away. Yes, definitely wanted to say, good morning to everybody and thank everybody for coming out, and being part of our first podcast that will be dealing with domestic violence here in Prince George's County. So the reason why we starting out with our safety officers is because they get the first call. And a lot of times people in the community, they often wonder like, hey, why didn't the police do this? Why didn't the police do that? And then we're going to move along and we're going to bring up our legal team. Because then the same question is, why didn't the judge do this? And why this and that and the other didn't happen inside the courtroom? So we just trying to also educate people on the process. And then to sum up, today we're going to have our community advocates, one of our senator who sits on the Judiciary Committee in Annapolis, because the only way that we can bring about change if we don't like something is through legislation. Fast forward, moving backwards, the legal team only works with the legal matters that they able to govern or to win a case. The police and safety officers, they go by the law too. So they can't just lock up two people if the law doesn't say that, if somebody make a call. So thank y'all for being here. So I had some really, great questions for our safety officers, because you do get the first call. The first one, are there any certain neighborhoods or communities seeing a rise in these type of crimes? So we talk about domestic violence, non-lethal, because a lot of times people think about, guns, but a lot of times this is with the fist. Non-lethal type weapons that are involved. And we just want to know, have you all seen a rise in that?
So I guess I'll start off. Hello, everybody. When we talk about a rise in domestic violence, yes, we have been seeing that ever since the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the biggest issues that we've been seeing is that a lot of it is now family violence. It's not intimate partners. You're talking about a mother, daughter, mother, son, father, daughter, father, son, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who may actually reside in the same home now are starting to see more of the domestic violence issues. I am happy to report that intimate partners, we're not seeing as much as far as court-issued protective orders dealing with intimate partners. We are seeing that rise in dealing with the family. I know you may mention too what communities. I'm gonna say every community, and that's one thing I want people to know. It doesn't make a difference about your socioeconomic status, where you may live, whether you live in Bowie, whether you live in Capitol Heights, whether you live in Oxon Hill. Domestic violence is everywhere. And one thing that we do know from being in public safety is that when it touches people, a lot of times people may not report. They may not come forward. They may want to keep it in their homes. And we do realize in the higher economic areas, you don't have those reporting. in our immigrant community up north, or even in the central and down south, you won't get those reporting, and that's more of a cultural issue. But when you do look at the high economic status of certain individuals, they don't want their business out in the street. What happens in my house stays in my house. And then that survivor of domestic violence, or someone who's going through that, they don't want, they feel the embarrassment of people knowing that, hey, even though we have money and that we're supposed to be a family, that we're going through these issues. So it definitely affects everybody here in the county.
Woo. Thank you for that earful, information and what you, actually experience, I guess, day to day. And, definitely we had to do something about it. And it looked like all of us look like we basically are from the African American community, and that is a big issue. What goes on in our house stays in our house, and that's when things escalate. People embarrassed. I guess with children, if you take it on to school, I guess with the professionals, and you trying to have a conference with a child and a parent, and sometime on the other end, I guess you could see that the parent is a little intimidated by their child. That wasn't the case for Generation X, but Generation Y, and it may be a little different, in raising them. So those are some things that we definitely need to be able to address. So then, here's another question: how are officers trained to handle domestic violence calls, especially when no weapons is involved, but the danger is still present?
So officers receive training throughout the academy as well as throughout their careers on domestic violence situations. In addition to that, we have in-service training, which is something that they have to do annually. But what we instruct our officers to do when they go to the scene of a domestic violence situation is to actually separate the parties so that a potential victim can feel comfortable telling the officer what exactly happened. They're also trained to look for signs of violence, be it bruises or a scuffle that occurred in the house. However, if there's a situation where we cannot make an arrest because there's no probable cause, we instruct our officers to instruct the individuals that they should probably separate for the night. And we go a step further to try to facilitate that process. If they need a ride to a family member's house, or if we need to take them to a hotel, we try to do things like that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. A lot of times we see stuff on TV, because you said something about bruises. And I said sometime, not, saying that, with sometime with women or whatever we see in movies, they sitting there, inflicting pain on themselves because they know that, hey, when you all come, hey, I got a bruise or whatever the case may be. But, sometime I guess men, I want to flip this, because men be getting beat up and they be getting cut and hit. Especially people that I say that's in the military that carry a gun. You all can't get no confrontation or anything like that because it jeopardizes your job. So when men have women like that in their lives or whatever the case may be, how I guess when you get those calls, how do you figure that part out, with your training?
Good morning. So it's important that in law enforcement and with our officers that we focus on the facts and not just what the stigma is of domestic violence, right? So a lot of people believe that domestic violence is purely physical, which it's not, right? Domestic violence can also be financially, it can be emotionally, right? Whatever the case may be. But when you go to the scene and there are individuals that we say would have signs of abuse, right? Marks, scratches, whatever the case may be, it's important for those officers that are on scene to do a thorough investigation initially, right? And that includes the interviewing of both the witness and the possible offender, right? It also may be interviewing other family members that are there, right? A lot of people forget about the unspoken victims of domestic violence, and that's our youth, right? The youth are the ones are typically there and they witness it all. It's hard for us to talk to juveniles, right? In these type of situations, but sometimes it's important because what they see, they will emulate. And if we don't try to break that curse initially, we're going to see domestic violence continue to be the highest reported crime in Prince George's County, right? Or in the country. So it's not just so much about marks and bruises because as you said, men can be victims as well, but a victim can have bruises as well as an offender can have bruises, right? So I can be defending myself from domestic violence and end up causing injury to the other party, but I was the victim in the case. So it's important that the officers not just take what they see on the forefront and go on the facts and all the evidence that they have provided when they're doing their interviews.
Thank you for that. My other question, I guess, just to add on to that, because years ago we had nosy neighbors, we had people that was involved. Then all of a sudden, it seemed like with, I guess my Generation X, we ain't want people in our business, but back in the day, everybody was, they rubberneck, they had bent blinds and all that good stuff. But then it kind of changed. What happened when a neighbor, actually witnessed and they call and say, hey, I don't want to report it, but hey, I just saw a young lady, getting dragged or beat. How do you deal with that? The baby, would you all act on that? If somebody made a call and say, hey, I just witnessed this young lady getting slammed, blank, 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 going into the house, groceries all over the place, how would you deal with that in order that the neighbor, I guess, is not sabotaged or whatever the case may be, but also to go check on that individual?
So you can actually provide a tip and remain anonymous. Any information that we get, it's a way of how we would go about either interviewing or talking to that person who provided that information to us. It's not like the neighbor actually called and we have to go to the neighbor and say, hey, well, your neighbor called and said there was an issue and a problem. We don't do that. We understand that you have to live there. This is your community. The issue that we do see on a regular basis is that we get people who won't report it. You get people who will watch somebody get beat right in front of them and will drive by, walk by, won't say anything, and they say, well, hey, I'm minding my business. So we appreciate and we want individuals to reach out, call 911, even still try to assist and help as far as intervening if somebody is going to be seriously injured. Not asking you to fight. What I'm saying is that if you have somebody fleeing a home or trying to get away, if that person is outside, you're able to then provide some sort of relief and let them in. You dial 911. It's the little things that make a difference. Ring cameras have also been vital and important for us. Telephones have been vital and important for us when we're trying to actually deal with a case and trying to have probable cause in order to either make an arrest or to understand what goes on. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of our domestic violence, and we see this in court because we're still averaging close to 2,000 peace and protective orders a month. So we're number one in the state here in Prince George's County. Some of that is because people are informed and they are getting involved, but we really need to make sure that as a community, we can report, and that's the biggest thing is reporting those crimes.
All right, give me that mic. So now, in saying that, how could we, as a community, change that narrative that you can report, just like, I guess, like when it's a reward or whatever the case may be like $5,000, $10,000, whatever they can report, people come forward, but letting our community know that, hey, that you can report, that we're gonna, we're not gonna tell your neighbor, but it's a community. Your business is making it, your business is my business. So changing that in our community, through outreach, through a mailer, through partnerships with people who possibly, that can be maybe their particular, assignment while they on a council, whatever the case may be, that they can send out a newsletter. Since we noted this the highest, can we make an effort to have some type of campaign with our municipalities, with the whole Prince George's County, that it's okay to call? Because one thing that I do know, when it happened to their family members, they want everybody to know. So we have debate. I think that would help in changing the narrative. Also, later on, I'm gonna have, a person come up, Johnny Biggs. Maybe we can create a play, because everybody learned differently. Just like we just witnessed the movie Straw, everybody learned differently. So maybe we can, come up with a play or something that people can participate, that it's all right to call, because if it's your daughter, if it's your niece, or if it's your nephew, you're going to want somebody to see something, say something. So how does the department collaborate with the community organizations and shelters to support the survivors, the people who are calling? Do we have places that people can go here in the county to be able to separate? Because I heard you mention earlier that, to try to separate or take somebody out the house. Do we have those facilities?
So absolutely, we have those facilities, and we partner with domestic violence organizations such as Ruth House. But something that we did that was sort of unique in Bladensburg is we created a voucher program. So if there's a victim of domestic violence that doesn't have somewhere to go, we've partnered with local hotels in a voucher program to be able to take them to those locations, those safe havens, to get away from that situation that may not have escalated to the point of an arrest, but is getting to the point where it could be volatile for that person. I can remember back on a specific situation where an officer went above and beyond and paid for a hotel out of his own pockets to try to get somebody out of a situation that could have turned violent.
And see, these are the stories that they don't cover on the news.
Man, I do want to make mention too, and I know we utilize this, but the Family Justice Center. And that is a one-stop shop. And one thing that I'm very proud of as far as Prince George's County, due to the wonderful work that you see, these gentlemen here and our legal team here and just county officials, strangulation being a first-degree assault, and actually having that ability. So if I don't have the physical bruises that I can see right then and there, you can actually get it's a camera that would actually show if you've been strangled or not. And then it helps us as far as building a case. But the Family Justice Center is where you can actually go as well to provide all of the resources, because a victim or survivor of domestic violence, we're boots on the ground and we're right there with them. Then we take them to the hospital, we take them to some other place. They're reliving that story by telling that story over and over again. And I already told you, now I have to go and I have to tell you because you provide this service. Then I tell somebody else. So I've told the story 3 or 4 times in a matter of hours, and it's still, fresh with me as far as trauma. So these are the things that we're trying to avoid. But the lucky thing is that we work very well together, and we're getting in front of it.
All right. Well, I say, thank you, very much, for answering our questions today. Definitely the Sila Foundation, and we have some other organizations here. Together we can, a good friend that this is definitely, something that she's been very much involved. And then we have Vision Quest is here. We definitely would love, I'm saying this for all of us, would love to be able to work with you all on having a campaign in Prince George's County, with all the information, because how many people know it's a voucher program in Bladensburg? And maybe that may encourage the other municipalities to add that, for their constituents. How many people know about the House of Ruth and the Family Justice Center? So we have a lot of great things in Prince George's County, but just our community, when they're in trouble, they don't know about it. So if we can get the information to them before they're in trouble, making sure that somebody know, because somebody's gonna need that information. So that means churches. So we boots on the ground. We with y'all. Yeah, but yeah. So we just wanted to say thank y'all for y'all participation. I'm not exactly sure if anybody in the audience have any, questions or any feedback. Okay, the young man up front have a question. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Saeed Shakur, and I was wondering, so we talked about how you can tell the police if somebody is being domestically violent, right? But how do you stop it in the first place from happening,
So one of the biggest things when you talk about stopping, we just talked about a culture change, especially in our households. A lot of times when we look at our family structure and we talk about not being open and honest and what domestic violence looks like, as the chief said, it's more than just physical abuse. It can be verbal, financial. There's so many different aspects. What we try to do, and I know C Pleasant does a wonderful job, Bladensburg does a wonderful job in the community events and working with our youth, understanding what a healthy relationship looks like, understanding that if you are in a relationship with somebody, them taking your phone and going through it, or making that you have to share your location or checking your messages to see who called, that's not healthy. putting their hands on you or telling you what you can and can't do is not healthy. What we do see when we do our community events is a lot of our youth, from what they see on social media, what they see in TV, they believe a relationship is this person loves me because they're giving me that extra attention. And that's not the case. So I say that we start at our younger ages, showing them what a loving relationship looks like, showing what they should expect from their significant other, and then making sure that they have the resources if they are living in a home. Because the chief definitely made mention to the fact that our youth are the victims as well in domestic violence because they see it. And then that's what they do. They actually emulate. This is a relationship that I saw that my family or that my father or my mother was, this is how I love somebody. And we break that cycle at a younger age, providing those resources, providing that information, showing them that public safety is here for you if you need that. That's the way that we're going to break this cycle and eradicate domestic violence here in the county.
And just to piggyback on Sheriff Carr, we still see a lot of domestic violence in our youth, and especially when they get around the age of high school, right? And as Sheriff Carr stated, what we hear a lot is, well, I saw my mom go through this, right? Because we still understand, we still have a lot of single family households, right? And so they will say, well, I seen my mom go through this, so in my head, that's just how life is, right? And it's important that it's not just a public safety thing, but it's a community thing, that we all come together and ensure that we have a clear understanding that that's not the case. And it's important that they understand that what real love is. And while you may not see it at home or you may not get it at home, there's other places for you to be able to go and receive that type of information. And so when we talk about community events and we talk about the youth, it really goes beyond that, because we can sit here and we can talk to you all day long, right? We can show you videos, we can give you pamphlets, but if we aren't emulating as the role models or as the mentors and these type of things, if we're not emulating what we expect them to see or what we want them to learn, it's going to go nowhere.
I have a question. So I know with a lot of domestic violence victims, one of the biggest concerns is, and I know you guys did mention like the temporary like solutions that you all have for shelter and things like that, but what are some more of the long-term solutions? Because a lot of people do not report these situations who are going through them because they have to go back home and they have to deal with the ramifications of whatever is going to happen when that person, realizes that they got them in trouble. So how do you guys kind of mitigate that type of situation?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because there is definitely an underreporting of domestic violence based on the things that you said, because there are situations where the victims are dependent upon the abuser. It could be financially, it could be based on the fact that they have children together, and it could be the fear factor because the victim feels as though I'm going to report this, but at some point in time, this guy or this girl, because it goes both ways, is going to get out of jail or prison and be back in my life, and now I'm at risk again. So one of the things that I'm proud to say about Bladensburg, because it is a smaller community, we're able to be more involved in the community itself, especially in our apartment complexes. We have great relationships with the property management, and a lot of them are very, very involved in their communities, so they know what's going on. But one thing that we've instructed our officers to do is, even though after you go to a domestic violence situation and the call for service didn't result in an arrest or something of that nature, you need to go follow up. You need to go back there at some point that night, the following week, and make sure that that person's okay. You need to check in with the property manager of those locations to see if there's been any escalating issues, if the neighbors have heard noise. So that way we can try to make sure that everyone's safe. Even though they aren't reporting it, we're trying to get ahead of it.
And I want to piggyback off of that. So we do have special victim advocates as well that actually follow them through the process as far as going to court. But I want to make sure everybody also is aware that a lot of times people won't go through that process. So when you talk about long-term solutions, we have to make sure that we're there and consistent with those individuals when they want to go through that, but they have to be ready. Even though we respond to that home and we're providing resources and we're trying to assist and help you, if you're not ready because of you have a child together, you don't want to break your family up, because this individual actually pays all of the bills and financial. You have to be ready. We just have to be ready to receive you and to always make sure that you know your options and what you can and can't do. But we cannot force people because we see each and every day, and we go to, repeat calls, and we don't, we want to make sure that we're able to solve it. But if that individual wants to stay in this type of environment, and domestics are one of our most dangerous calls, because the individuals that we are there to actually service, they will then flip and say, well, hey, I don't want his person locked up. I just wanted us to break it up and for us to stop. So we have to make sure that we're just there for them when they are ready to actually move forward.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because I've been in that situation that a friend called me and said, hey, you need to go by there, because it was one of my family members. I go by there, the police, they was there. And then she was like, she didn't want to leave. And I'm like, what? So all that stuff is difficult. Then you still have to be to face that the person that they with, or whatever the case may be. But me being me, I told the person, I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about my cousin, whatever the case may be, like that. But everybody is not that bold, and also not that crazy to go put yourself in a situation like that. But I did learn a lesson, reference to it, because that bond, is strong. Like the person, I guess somebody hears something over the phone, they didn't go, they called me. You go, you blind, like, hey, you really don't know what happened, what they heard, but all you just, just wanted to make sure the person was safe. But that does happen a lot in our community. So that's why, but we still have to be to change the narrative, because it's also about saving lives. So still, to this day, we celebrate, we still family, and look like things have gotten better between the two of them. But also just letting the other person know, hey, this person had family that care about them. Because sometimes, when people are in them situations, they told, hey, nobody gonna do anything, nobody care. I only care about you, whatever the case may be. But just to know that, hey, I got my eyes on you. Yeah. Oh, we had two people have they have their hands up in the front. They have questions. Oh, in the back.
Already had.
No, go ahead. You had a mic.
Appreciate you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheila Watts, and I sit on the board of directors for Angels Haven, a domestic violence organization. And one of the biggest things is, like you said, is that a lot of people don't have the means to leave. So, like, I wanted to ask, what happens after they get the voucher and go into the hotel, and how long is it that they are able to stay in the hotel?
So they're able to,
So they're able to stay in the hotel for a few days. Unfortunately, it's not longer. But as I stated, we do instruct our officers to follow up. And I mean, I'm glad that you brought that point up, because oftentimes they can't get out of that situation because there is a dependency. So there needs to be real conversations about helping these victims of domestic violence to get on their own feet, so that they don't have that dependency to where they want to stay in that situation. So I think it's very important that we, even as law enforcement, explore our options on helping people get viable jobs to where they can support themselves and get out of those situations.
Yeah, one of the things that we want to do is to have a building, an area where there's apartments where the victims can come and stay. Because I know we've dealt with a lot of victims who wanted to leave, but didn't have the means to do so after we provided the help for them. So we keep trying to figure out ways to, and like you're saying, Tasha, that some of there needs to be something that's in place that they can go to and have resources for after. Like, I don't know exactly what the Family Justice Center provides, like what kind of help they provide, but that's the crucial point, is something for them to do after the immediate incident.
And I think you bring up a very good point. So we do have it's not a lack of shelters, but as far as space and locations in which somebody who is involved in domestic violence, where they can actually go. I know it has been brought up, by several of the other elected officials, state officials, of trying to create something and have something here so that you have at an undisclosed location or a location that their abuser won't be able to find them and that they can actually go. Currently, right now, we do see that if I am a survivor of domestic violence and I have kids, and we start looking at shelters, depending on the age of my kids, depending on where I can actually go. And then do I want to take my child to the shelter with me with everybody else? So these are the type of issues that we are seeing, that we are facing, and that we're trying to come up with solutions. But there's definitely a need for additional spaces for those who are going through domestic violence. One being for their safety, but two, also if you're a part of a family, and let's say you have a infant, you have a toddler, you may have a teenager. They're all different ages, depending on what shelters or where you may go. They may not allow you to have everybody. Heaven forbid you have somebody who's, 16 or 17. That becomes another issue. So you do bring up a very good point.
And then I'd just like to ask, how do you all handle situations with police officers that get into situations with domestic violence?
No tolerance. There's no tolerance. We cannot be. We serve our community, and serving our community, we have to follow all rules, regulations, and laws. How are we trying to eradicate something that affects our community so much when we're a part of it, as far as being the problem? And I know a lot of times people think, well, they have a gun and a badge, they're going to get special treatment. That's not the case. I can give just a personal example. Actually taking this role as sheriff, probably within the first, I would say 3 or 4 months, actually had to send information to the state's attorney's office so one of our officers could get prosecuted. And this is something that we did extra when we were made aware of some additional information of our officer's mistreatment of one of his significant other. So we have to do our jobs, and there's no tolerance when it comes to abuse, especially if you're wearing this uniform. We serve our community, and we take too much pride in earning the respect of our citizens to be involved in something as such.
And I echo everything that the sheriff has said, and I just want to add to the fact that I believe it's called the Lautenberg Amendment, which means if you're convicted of a crime of domestic violence, you can't have a firearm. And if we see that for someone who's trying to apply to be a police officer who's been convicted of a crime of domestic violence, they can't be a police officer.
Someone else in the audience had a question.
Good morning. My name is William Bumpus. I'm with One Love Life Center. This is a very great discussion, and I'm learning a lot, and everyone's input and questions is really evoking a lot of emotions, because I grew up in a domestic violence household, and for years I thought it was normal, until my mother, a self-inflicted wound, self-inflicted, shot herself. She killed herself, suicide. And this is a result of my parents arguing, and that happened when I was 16. And I can give you so many stories. I have a friend right now doing life, for murdering his girlfriend at Taco Bell. And I have a cousin that he did 8 years for domestic violence that wasn't his fault. He was kicked out of the car on the interstate. He walked away. His girlfriend hitting him. A child, which was there, he was his stepson. He was 8 years old, ran out and got hit by a truck on the interstate. So they made him like he was the worst kind of guy. But he took the charge because they have a 1-year-old baby. And he was just murdered as a retaliation back in January, a few months ago. And my question is, and I always wonder, what can I do? I've talked, even as a kid, with my mother. I've talked to my mother. I talked to my father. I talked to my cousin that was just murdered, and talked to my friend. Even as when I was a kid, my friend. He's older than me, and he was arguing with his girlfriend. I stepped in between that, as a teenager. So my question is, what preventive ways and measures that I can take as a friend when you see that this relationship is gonna lead to death? You know, like what can I do, or is there anything that I could do?
So what I would say is, and I tell people this all the time, is you cannot be afraid to have tough conversations, especially with those that you love, right? Um, Domestic violence is so close to me because similar to you, I grew up in a home of domestic violence, right? So when it's not often that I go to domestic violence calls now, but if I do go, I take them especially serious, right? I started my career at the sheriff's office in the domestic violence unit, and I spent my entire time in the sheriff's office in the domestic violence unit. And the reason that I was so prone to stay in that unit was because it's something that I grew up in, right? So we talked about victims having to be ready or whatever the case may be, but sometimes in law enforcement, when we're responding to these calls, we have to be brutally honest and brutally serious with people to let them know this is not just a normal call for service, right? The police aren't just here because we want to be here. Domestic violence, and this is what I tell folks, domestic violence starts very little, right? It starts with, someone up here talked about, getting your location, checking your messages, right? Figuring out why you're not at home on time. It starts there, and then it just progressively gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and ultimately it can end up in death. And not a lot of people want to hear that or want to understand it, but it's a conversation that has to be had. So I think the first part of what you can do and what you should do, especially if it's someone that's affecting someone that you love, is have those tough conversations, right? When we have examples in our life that we can provide to folks and let them know, hey, listen, I mean, you have a testimony that not many other people have, right? Domestic violence has hit you and your family in so many different aspects. You are the type of person that we need to be able to stand up and let people know it's not a game and it's not a joke, right? Domestic violence, we talked about it starts very young, and domestic violence can go until you're very old, right? Most people think domestic violence is something that we see in around the 20s and the 30s. I'm telling you, I've responded to domestic violence cases of 80-year-olds, right? I've responded to domestic violence cases with 11 and 12-year-olds, right? One case that sits particularly with me is we had a 15-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl, and they were at the young boy's parents' house, and the young boy beat up on his girlfriend at his parents' house, right? And so when we get the call and we get there, it's like, first you would expect, as a parent, you wouldn't allow something like that, right? But when it is the cultural norm and trying to break those family generation curses, it's hard at times. But if we don't do our part, and when I say our, I do not mean just in law enforcement, I mean as a community, if we do not do our part to stand up and continue to voice and have these type of tough conversations, it's never going to go anywhere. To get back to your specific question, what can you do? Have those conversations, right? Be a resource to that person, right? So, we talked about you may not have anywhere to go from a domestic violence situation. If you have the opportunity or you have the reason, invite your family member into your house, right? Let them know that they have somewhere else to go. They have another shoulder to lean on besides what they believe is all they got is in their abusive spouse.
I want to just piggyback off of that because Chief Hayward was spot on in reference to saying you got to have those tough conversations. If somebody has a family or a child, you have to let them know that, hey, the ramifications of you not leaving could result in your child not having their mother or their father. It could actually affect them in the long term. That child eventually will get old enough to where they will intervene, and that becomes another issue where you have either a stepson or a son actually fighting the father, or you have a daughter fighting the mother. It can go both ways. But I do want to also highlight something that we don't really talk about. And for the sheriff's office, we specialize in dealing with domestic violence because it's something we do. But this is for our men, especially our Black men. We need to be able to talk about how we feel, and I think you may mention to that before, and we need to also look at our roles in our families and the family structure. We need to have those tough conversations because, as you may mention, too many times we may be, the victim or survivor of domestic violence, but we won't say anything. We may be feeling a certain type of way, and because you're challenged by a woman who now is challenging your manhood or beating on you, you then react, which start. We need to have these tough conversations amongst each other on order how we deal with this, what we can do to one end that domestic violence, that cycle, and then also how to address, our ladies, our women, and how we can have that healthy relationship, especially as we get older.
Can I just add one more thing? I think we also too need to stop normalizing toxicity. Like a lot of people think that it's so cute to be, ooh, she toxic, I'm toxic, and it's not normal. And we are desensitizing unnormal behaviors. And I think a lot of people are repeating those things because they think it's cute, and it's not. It's not.
I want to just, on top of that, and on top of what the sheriff just said, where do we get that norm from? Social media, right? You know, I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you said it, toxicity it's the new thing on social media, right? And we see, especially, and I always go back to our younger folks because in C Pleasant, our strategies have always been to target our youth, target our youth, target our youth, right? They're our future. So what do our youth spend 9 times out of 10 doing? On social media, right? We call them iPad babies for a reason, right? So when they're on social media, majority of the course of their day and majority of their life, and they're seeing that and they're idolizing these people that they see on social media, that's where they get this norm from. And when we also, when Sheriff Carr talked about, us black men, we also have to be mindful of mental health plays a big part in this as well, right? And as black men, we need to understand that our mental health matters, right? And if we aren't taking our own mental health seriously and going to get the help that we need and recognizing and being receptive to folks telling us that, hey, you may need to go talk to somebody about this. You may need to go get these type of services. If we don't start taking those things serious so that we can, feed into ourselves and better ourselves, we're never going to then be willing to start really making the decisions and making matters better when it comes to our household.
But I definitely wanted to thank you all, for having a conversation, for, educating us on the process of the work that you all do daily. We definitely would like to be able to continue this and, to put some things in action. We have a lot of takeaways because it sounds like we definitely can use like a men's support group because a lot of times we help the survivors, but we don't help the abuser. The abuser need help too. And that was one thing that One Love Life Center, that organization, that was one of their focus. The executive director, recently passed, but I think on June 3rd of this year. But I believe that's something that we should pick up, that we have to be to focus on everybody, and everybody can do their part. Everybody maybe can't work with the abuser, but there's somebody out there that can. But we need services for them. And I like the part that, what you had said, that mental health is important for people to be able to express, hey, that I'm hurt, hey, that I'm, frustrated, hey, I can't make the money that I want to make, so I feel less than an individual. But also what you had mentioned too, Sheila, far as helping people get better careers. They may start off as a cashier, but maybe during that time while they work, and maybe we can work on them getting some certifications that can help them add more income to their household. So I think, people may start one way, but just creating avenues when we find out that these people are in these situations, having doing an assessment and seeing where they are career wise and seeing how we can help get them further. So I'm just thankful for the conversation. that we had. Give them a round of applause. Definitely appreciate y'all. This not gonna be our last time. We gonna run this back. Keep on bringing it back. In different parts of the community, but definitely wanted to say thank y'all for participating today. So we're gonna, the next team that will be coming up, next segment will definitely be our legal. The people that have to deal with the victims as well as the abusers in the courtroom. So thank y'all very much. So we're gonna take a short break.